This person was creating fake accounts, then establishing his own business. And then he was taking the leads that we were generating and using them to enrich himself, and then lied about it. He was stealing money from our other distributors one way or the other. Here I am, and I told everybody to trust this person. Meanwhile, he's stealing from them. He recorded thousands of hours of phone calls. It broke me internally. Whoa, what am I getting into here? And I probably sat in that self-blame for too long. It leads to other bad decisions in your life.
Welcome back to another episode of Limitless. Today I have with me Nick Breedlove. He's the founder and CEO of NVB Playgrounds. And Nick is coming on the show to talk about the topic that perhaps most people are avoiding. And I was just sharing with Nick before I hit record here that over 300 episodes of Limitless, no one has come forward wanting or be willing to speak about betrayal. But at the other side, most of my coaching clients, therapy clients, and also in my men's group have this huge damage or issue with betrayal. Many people are struggling with betrayal. So I'm so happy to have Nick with us today to talk about this. Nick, a warm welcome to you. How are you?
I am doing awesome. I'm really happy to be talking about this topic. I love it. It was very difficult for me for a long time to just talk about betrayal, and ever since then, I think as soon as you have those conversations with fellow business owners and other people in the business community, you realize that everybody struggles with it, and it's just how do you get past it as a person and as a leader, as a husband, as a father. There's so many different layers to it when it happens, and but I'm just super excited to be able to talk about it. And we're NVB Playgrounds. I'm based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. We have about 140 employees. Operations are in Savannah and Houston and Indianapolis. And we've been in business for just under 20 years. It'll be 20 years this December 2026.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing. That's a decent size operation you have. Congratulations then.
Thanks.
So Nick, since we've done that introduction, let's get into it then. Betrayal, and I think what I can just share also that I'm also guilty. It's something that I suffered from, and if I'm looking at myself, I remember over a decade ago when I had been betrayed. I remember saying a quote by Mark Twain who said that the more I get to know people, the more I like my dog. And I printed that quote out, and then I remember I even crossed it over and then I said, and I hate dogs. I don't like dogs, but that was the state of how I like people myself after I had been betrayed. So a lot of hate, and I remember those feelings there. But today the show is about you, Nick. Can you take us back, and let's start there. You have been betrayed. Otherwise, you wouldn't be with us today. What happened?
I've been at this point. I've been betrayed a few times, and it's one of those things where the first time is a big one for me, and I think I was scaling up. We had just bought a new warehouse. We were probably at 30 million in revenue, and we were just when you're in that growth period and you're just growing. I think that things got away from me. I had way too many people that were reporting to me on a daily basis. I probably had 18 direct reports, and it's unmanageable. And I put a lot of trust in people, more so than a normal person should have. And unfortunately, it exposed a weak system that I had built. At the end of the day, it wasn't necessarily something I did. It was more about the system I created. I put standards in place that didn't really exist other than in my head. Didn't do a great job of writing things down, and I opened myself up to this massive, a fraud of what happened. And in my case, it's like so many. You have a manager or someone like that in charge, and with myself, it was this person was. We sell playgrounds. It's not dangerous stuff. It's playground equipment for kids, for schools, parks. It's just commercial stuff, and we have a lot of distributors. So we have around 250 or so distributors across the U.S., and they're small business owners. They're all making around 3 million in revenue at least usually, and so this person was creating fake accounts and then establishing his own business, and then he was taking the leads that we were generating and using them to enrich himself through one of these, he essentially created his own distributorship and funneled leads through it. And then lied about it, and he was stealing money from our other distributors one way or the other, among a variety of other things. Person put his computer in a microwave, and he recorded thousands of hours of phone calls with other employees. He would set up he was constantly on a strategy to establish his position in a lawsuit eventually. It was like, I'm going to talk to accounting today, and I'm going to try and push through a distributor. Well, Nick wants it done because, if we don't do this, we're going to lose the sale. And he would use that, and then he would do it for his own company, because then it bought him that, okay, it was okay then, surely it's okay now. So, and he built all these things around him, and then, when it was over and I saw, all that would happen, we realized, gosh, how does this happen? And then all of a sudden I had to go through, 1,800 hours worth of recordings that he had recorded of internal people and meetings. And it's like he was constantly trying to, in his head, like, analyze how he was going to go to jail over what he was doing, wiring and wire frauds and, did he ever break the law? Who knows? I don't really even know at the end of the day, like, what he was doing to that extent. But it broke me internally, because when I found out, he sat there and he didn't want to admit it. And then we finally did. It's like, it was awful. He's finally admitting what he did. And the rest of the team, they all had to go, because a lot of them knew what was going on and they were complicit. And I was like, how could I have an entire business unit under my guidance, under my what I was doing? How could I have this? And I didn't see it coming. How could I be so thoughtless and so careless, and crushed me? All these people depend on me. A lot of people work for me, not a lot, but to me it's a lot. And here I am, and I told everybody to trust this person. Meanwhile, he's stealing from them, and he's going against what we all are trying to fight for. And it was awful, right? And, trying to get past that, even for the first couple of years. I'm in the playground business, but when somebody put a phone down on the table for probably a year, I was like, whoa, what am I getting into here? And that's like the mental game that it was playing with my head for a long time. Like, how big does this deception have to go? But, like all things, it must pass. And I think the most important thing for me was giving myself a little bit of time to grieve the situation for what it was, right? Because it was difficult, to say the least. The amount of money that we spent on the court case alone was in the millions of dollars. Prosecutor, going after him and proving his guilt until that finally came through. And you're at that point where it's like, was it all worth it? All of this is for what? I just want to sell playgrounds. I just want to live a peaceful life mostly. And then I realized, how can I set up a company that is never going to be a part of this again? How can I make sure that we don't have this? And one of the things back then that I didn't believe in, Nick, was like core values. I was a kid when I started this thing. I was probably like 21, 22 years old. And I thought, I didn't really understand what a core value meant or any of that. And I think that was my first real pass back then, was really, I knew I never wanted to have this happen as much as possible. You can't be certain it wasn't going to happen, but how can I create a company where this type of person cannot exist possibly? And that's what my journey led me to, was the steps in which that pattern could not create itself and expose itself again.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that, Nick, and we will come to the solution and what you did then later on. I just want to go back to that moment then when it all happened, and you were very young, as I'm hearing. You were in your early 20s. and so on. And I think many of us, and me also, maybe a bit naive at that stage, and we cannot know everything yet. A lot of experience come from experience here. So if you think back about when it hit you, then if you can remember, what did you feel? Was it anger, shock, or shame, or what went through you at that time? If you can,
I think it's definitely started with anger. There was a lot of anger. I think it was important for me back then to try and blame somebody, and it was for me it was blaming him, and then it was shame immediately afterwards. It was blaming myself. And I probably sat in that self-blame for too long. I think when you sit in that type of place, it leads to other bad decisions in your life at times. Addictions of alcohol and everything else that go with that, right? And I already struggled with my own battles in regards to those types of things. And that moment of my life did not help those moments.
Yeah, it seems like, what I'm learned from many leaders and myself was when we go through some of those challenges, when they come and hit us as a surprise, we might not be ready to use any thoughtful coping mechanism. We reach for something that can help us right now, and especially if you are in anger. And I heard you mentioned alcohol, and I see especially in men, Nick, that's a very, very common one around betrayal. I know many men out there who are using alcohol, drugs, or other means to cope with that. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about what you were going through at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I was near a divorce. I had 2 children. Just couldn't figure out, I was just losing myself a little bit. Didn't quite know who I wanted to be as a human being. And that moment did not help me by any means, gather my thoughts. And I think one of the biggest pushers of the alcohol and stuff back then was, being younger, I wasn't really exposed to enough people in the business community that were, I wouldn't say that I didn't have enough, didn't have anybody to look up to. I didn't have a support system in place. I had no other entrepreneurs that I was really friends with. My friends were friends from my younger days. And the lives that we live as entrepreneurs are often very different, especially when you're trying to build a bigger business of some kind. You have a lot of things that you give up in life. So I'd say that it was very lonely for me back then, and a little confusing as a human being, just trying to understand what path I wanted to take and what kind of person I really wanted to be.
So what I'm hearing, Nick, from you is that, due to the young age and so on, you didn't really have any other entrepreneurs, no mentors per se, no peer network or other business owners who could help you and lift you up, and therefore you suffered a bit of silence. And that's also very common what I hear with young entrepreneurs, that we're trying to be tough, we're trying to grind through. Yes, I can do this, but internally it can be extremely painful. Is that sort of what I'm hearing, Nick?
Yeah, I mean that's essentially the gist of it. I started the company with my mom and dad to a point, but they were only involved for a year, maybe a few years, 2 or 3 years, and then at that point they moved away off to a retirement village, and I kept on growing it from there. So just it was a lot on my shoulders, I guess, and I did not handle that. I didn't handle the success the way I probably should have, looking back at it, but I handled it the way I did. I wouldn't give it another thought. I learned a lot from my bad decisions.
Yeah. And Nick, thank you for your honesty and sharing about this moment, because there could be others, listeners who are going through this, and some of the listeners are also young entrepreneurs and so on. Could you remember what was the hardest in this, or your lowest point when you went through that? Do you remember that moment, and could you share what you were going through then?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's just a lot of sadness and just... it's a little bit of grief, I mean, you work so hard for the business and the opportunity to have the life that you want, or, if that's what you want in life. But one way or the other, you work and you put so much energy and effort into something, creating something. And for somebody to be the antithesis to that and to cavalierly just go about trying to destroy that in their own way, or feed off of that with their whatever negativity they're going through in life. I don't know. It's pretty gut wrenching, and it's a miserable it put me in a miserable state of mind for a long time. And I've been there a few times as a business owner. I've been through a lot of bad breakups when it comes to employees. And the longer I've been doing it, the more they happen, because HR only works so well. You can't get everybody to be great, but we've had people that have been with me for almost 20 years. So I know we're doing something right, but I'd say the feeling of desperation, I don't know, it's just desperation and misery.
Yeah. And Nick, thank you for sharing that, what you went through there. And I hear grief mentioned from you. Yeah, we lose something, obviously, there. And what happened then? What was your turning point? What needed to happen for you to come out of this?
What needed to happen? It's a really great question. I think it's for me, it took a while. I'd say it probably took a good 2 years. I mean, we're still growing, we're still scaling. It didn't stop just because of this moment. So the business didn't slow down necessarily. It's kept speeding up. So I don't know that I had the moment to take my time in it as I should have back then. But for myself, I feel like I grew up Catholic, which is its own thing and its own belief system, and I had kind of abandoned that as a kid just because of the things that they had done here in the States throughout the communities. They didn't. There was not a lot of trust left with them in where I grew up with, near in Wisconsin, near Madison. There was some issues up there with some of the priests, right? And just given up on that for a long time. But when I decided to go back to the faith and, the belief in God, and a little bit of just understanding that I'm not the most important person, and, I need to put other people a little bit ahead of myself. Whether that's I'm married now, got 3 kids. I think there's a lot of things that had to change in my life, and I had to be very open for those changes. And it's really, really tough when you're stuck in ways to be open to change. But I can honestly say that I have changed as a human being, and it's probably the hardest thing that I had to do was change. Because I think, what is it? They say that our brains are hardwired by the time we're 16 as boys, or 16 to 18. So, trying to convince yourself that you need to be a different human being is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
Yeah, and Nick, you mentioned that faith had to come into your life, and it helped in. What I also read between the line was that you started to get that away, and it's almost like a surrender moment also to understand that work is not only life. There's more parts to my life, and you're bringing in God into your life, you're bringing in family and children, and realizing that it's the whole picture, right? And I talk a lot in my work about that holistic approach to life, because so many of us high achievers, and especially men, we almost define ourselves in our business, and once there's big trouble there, the downside is as well that then we're taking a personal hit when it's actually the business which is injured. Is that something that you also felt during that time?
That resonates with myself a lot. I think I'm in this group. It's they were meeting in about a month. It's called the MMT Mastermind Talks, and there's a lot of guys that have been through some similar stuff, and it resonates a lot because you build this thing, and it's like a part of you one way or the other, and when anybody screws with it, man, it is just it's like, what are you doing? And then it's like, it's a piece of you. So fundamentally, if they're attacking it, they're attacking you, and it's so easy to take it personally. So easy. It is, but it's, at the end of the day, it's just a trap, and people are who they are, and some people are just not great people, and eventually they move on with life, and you must move on too, otherwise you get stuck in those moments forever.
Yeah. And how do you then separate your emotional pain here of that betrayal and be able to move forward with and making some practical decisions that are not emotionally loaded?
I think anybody around me back then will know that I was emotionally loaded. I think that's a really tough one. If anybody can master that, congratulations to them. I think very recently I was betrayed by a different employee, a different scenario entirely, and it was very unusual betrayal because it was one of those things where this person quit because they didn't agree with the direction we were going with a product, and so be it, and they decided to spread all these interesting, lies about other employees and other people in the company and about us and to our vendors. And it's one of those things where it's like, what is he saying? What's this person saying and why? But trying to stay not emotionally charged in those moments is so difficult. And usually what I do nowadays is I warn people. I not that I'm going to be mad, but hey, I'm having a difficult time dealing with this thing, and I'll explain what it is. And I'm really having a difficult time. So I'm not trying to make an excuse for it, but at the end of the day, everybody needs to kind of understand where my high energy or my low energy is coming from. I believe in that kind of radical candor on a level because I feel like they need to understand where I'm coming from as a human being and why am I at level 10 and they're down here at level 3? How do I get them? Because I know they'll fight for me. And if I'm more honest with them, they're going to fight with me rather than just underneath me.
And Nick, what I hear in you when you're sharing today, you reflect a lot about yourself. Also, you seem clearly you're part of it. It's hard to blame yourself. Also, you were young when it started and set up, and many times we learn from the mistakes, we learn from the failures and so on. And they can be too painful sometimes, as I realize in my own life. I wish it was just a little bit softer. If you could turn back time and be yourself, the young Nick, 20 years of age, what would you do differently?
I don't know. I think that if I could turn back time and do differently, I love my kids. Divorce is expensive and all, but it taught me a lot of things about myself, and I needed to grow up in a certain way. So I don't know. I think I'd probably tell myself to be a little bit more curious about people and try to lead with a bit more intentionality or don't do something. One of two things: either be very intentional or abandon. Because I don't need anything I don't even have the patience for surface level conversations. I don't have that. And I probably never have. But I put myself in situations in which I didn't succeed in life, and I think those things would have helped me understanding that.
Yeah, and then if you're looking after betrayal, then how can you trust people again? Is there a way that you have managed to come to a level where you sort of have healthy trust with other people?
It's a good one. I usually have to forgive myself for whatever it is that I feel like I've done in the situation where I've been betrayed. And after that point, everybody else is easy. It's just how I approach it. I think the weight is the heaviest on my own guilt and my own shame. Probably how I grew up, through my households that I grew up in. But I usually have to start to forgive myself for whatever it is. And then at that point, I usually don't have a problem forgiving people for what they've done. I don't have that, like, hatred doesn't run in me. I don't have any issue with the people who have stolen from me in the past or the people who have done things recently. It is what it is, and not in a nonchalant way, but like they make those decisions and they are their own and they have to live for those. I had to live through the experience of living with it, but I also forgive myself for putting myself and the others in that position and hope to do better.
Yeah, it sounds like you carry the learnings and you sound like you have a big heart, Nick. You're willing to forgive them and move forward there. I gone through the 12 steps myself. I went through some challenges a little bit over a decade ago. And one of the things that I learned in the 12 step was over these kind of situations was also to owning our part and cleaning up our side of the street. Even if it's hard to see, somehow the philosophy then goes that, well, there must be something in it that is our part as well. And if we own that and we make amends for that, then the other party is many times likely to come to the table and own their part as well. How does that sound to you, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, it's it resonates. I'm not myself done the steps, but I've had to get through it, and I probably would have done better with steps. But I think it was easier for me just to pretend like I didn't have a problem until everybody told me I did. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you gotta clean your own house before you worry about everybody else's. So
Yeah. And Nick, just finally here, if there's anyone listening, we have many entrepreneurs listening to this show, and they feel broken by betrayal, what would be the first step you recommend them to take to turn it around?
I think just taking a moment by yourself to feel it and live in it and give that a time, and you got to be able to give yourself true, honest time and sitting in it just by yourself. You just need to experience that and then move on with whatever else in your life needs to be attended to, because you cannot sit in that forever. It doesn't do you any good. So it's how I approach it, and I'm still here somehow.
Yeah. So turning it around into a learning and growth rather than something that you carry with you as pain. Is that what I'm hearing, Nick?
Yeah, I think carrying that pain around is a dangerous thing for your family, for everybody around you, and especially for your business at the end of the day. Nobody wants to work with anybody that is an emotionally charged wreck. So, how are you going to get your mind to that place? I think we're all individual in our own ways as far as how that goes. Half the time, I don't even know how to recharge myself. So for myself, I enjoyed my own time to be in nature. And at that point, I feel like I can get back in touch with myself a little bit.
Wonderful. Yeah, connecting with nature as well. Thank you for all your tips, Nick, and thanks for taking this conversation deep and sharing how we can go through betrayal. Is there anything I forgot to ask you? Any final note or message you want to leave with the listeners today?
Any final note for the listeners? No, I mean, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's probably going to if you're a business owner. And, you can't prepare for it, but there's always people to talk to, like yourself. And, there's so many different leaders out there who are capable of guiding you through that moment that just remember you're not alone.
Yeah, and I think that's a great last message today, Nick. And because the hardest is when we go through it alone. And I could also encourage every listener, if someone's going through this, just think, who is the person I can call right now to talk about this? Do you know some business owner, someone else who is perhaps a bit more senior, maybe someone who's been there? Or do you know someone who's gone through it? Then give them a call and have that conversation. Indeed, Nick, wonderful place to end today. And if any of the listeners want to reach out to you or pick up a copy of your book, also, I know you've written the biography of play on your perspective of running through the seasons of disruption of your business and so on. Anything you want to plug here and share with the listeners?
Plugs. I'm a big builder, so I build a lot of different assets. I built something recently called Playgrounds.com. It's a SaaS product. We're kind of playground safety, so it's more about like I'm a big reader, and there's a book called The Second Mountain. For me, trying to understand what my next approach was in this business was trying to build community, because I think community is a little bit damaged as a product of society, where we live with not trusting politicians and the news and everything else. And I built this application to try and help rebuild communities where they often start, which is the park and the playground.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Nick. Thanks for coming on the Limitless show, and thanks to all the listeners as well. And have a great rest of the week.